What if I told you there's a football coach who won 80% of his games with the Oakland Raiders, a winning percentage higher than John Madden, higher than Vince Lombardi, higher than Bill Belichick, and yet you have probably never heard his name in your entire life? He built one of the most dominant teams the AFL had ever seen. He coached in a Super Bowl. He went 33 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie in just 3 seasons. And then he vanished, erased, forgotten, as if he never existed. No statue, no documentary, no Hall of Fame bust, nothing. And the reason why he was erased from history is darker, more political, and more unfair than anything you will find in any NFL film special. His name was John Rauch, and by the time this video is over, you will never forget him again. Don't go anywhere. Let me set the scene for you. It is 1966. The AFL, the American Football League, is still fighting for respect. The NFL looks at the AFL like a little brother who will not stop tugging at their sleeve. Nobody in the NFL takes the AFL seriously, and no team in the AFL has a bigger chip on its shoulder than the Oakland Raiders. Now here is where our story begins. The Raiders had a young, fiery, ambitious guy running the show. Maybe you have heard of him, a man named Al Davis. Al Davis had been the Raiders' head coach. He was intense, he was brilliant, he was ruthless. But in 1966, Davis got pulled away from coaching to become the commissioner of the entire AFL. It was a power move. Davis wanted to wage war against the NFL. He wanted to force a merger between the two leagues, and he did exactly that. But that left a gaping hole on the Raiders' sideline. Who do you hand the keys to? Who gets one of the most talented rosters in professional football? The answer was a quiet, methodical, no-nonsense offensive mind named John Rauch. And what John Rauch did with those keys was absolutely spectacular. But before we get to the fireworks, you need to understand who this man was. Because John Rauch was not some random guy pulled off the street. Rauch played quarterback at the University of Georgia in the late 1940s. He was a 2-time SEC champion. He played in the NFL briefly, but where he really found his calling was on the coaching side of the game. He worked his way up as an assistant, grinding in the film room, designing plays, studying defenses, until he became the offensive coordinator for the Oakland Raiders under Al Davis. And here's what you need to understand about Rouch. He was an offensive innovator. The Raiders' vertical passing attack, that deep ball, stretch the field, take the top off the defense philosophy that became synonymous with Oakland football, Rouch was one of the key architects of that entire system. So when Al Davis left to become commissioner, Rouch was not just some placeholder. He was the guy who already understood the engine of that team. And in 1966, he took over as head coach. His first season, the Raiders went 8 wins, 5 losses, and 1 tie. A solid year, nothing crazy. But Rouch was learning, he was adjusting, he was installing his version of the offense. He was putting his fingerprints on every part of that roster. And then came 1967. And I need you to listen to me carefully because this season was absolutely absurd. The 1967 Oakland Raiders went 13-1 in the regular season. 13 wins, 1 loss, in an era where teams only played 14 regular season games. Their offense was a machine. Quarterback Darryl LaMonica, nicknamed the Mad Bomber, threw 30 touchdown passes, which was a massive number for that era. Wide receiver Fred Biletnikoff was making circus catches on every single drive. Hewitt Dixon gave them balance in the running game. And Rouch's offense was not just powerful, it was ahead of its time. Deep passes, play action, spreading the defense horizontally and vertically, concepts that would not become mainstream in the NFL for decades. The Raiders scored 468 points that season. They were putting up numbers that made other AFL teams look like they were playing a completely different sport. And it was not just the offense. The defense was absolutely stacked too. Guys like Ben Davidson, Dan Connors, and Tom Keating were mauling people on that defensive line week after week.
The 1967 Raiders won the AFL Championship, demolishing the Houston Oilers 40-7. Let that score sink in for a moment. 40-7 in a championship game. That is not a win, that is a statement. John Rauch had built a monster. Now here comes the moment that should have made John Rauch a legend. Super Bowl II, January 14th, 1968. The Oakland Raiders versus the Green Bay Packers. This was a massive deal. The AFL was desperate to prove it could compete with the NFL. The Packers had already won Super Bowl I against the Kansas City Chiefs, and the NFL establishment was still laughing at the AFL. The Raiders, Rouch's Raiders, were supposed to be the team that finally shut them up. But here's the reality. Those Green Bay Packers were one of the greatest teams in NFL history. This was Vince Lombardi's last game as head coach. They had Bart Starr. They had that legendary offensive line. They had a defense that played with the discipline of a military unit.
The Packers won 33-14. Was it a blowout? Yes. But here is what history never talks about. John Rauch's Raiders moved the ball. They competed. They showed the football world that the AFL was real. And instead of being celebrated for an incredible 13-1 season and an AFL championship, Rouch got criticized. The narrative became about the loss, not the journey. But Rouch did not flinch. He came back in 1968 and went 12-2, 12 wins and 2 losses. Let me put his 3-year record together for you right now. In 1966, he went 8-5-1. In 1967, he went 13-1, won the AFL Championship, and coached in Super Bowl II. In 1968, he went 12-2. Combined, that is 33 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie, a winning percentage of .805. That is the highest winning percentage of any head coach in Raiders history, higher than John Madden's .763, higher than anyone who has ever coached that franchise. Let me say that one more time so it really sinks in. Higher than John Madden. So the question becomes painfully obvious. Why does nobody know this man's name? And here's where the story gets really painful. Remember Al Davis, the guy who left to become AFL commissioner? Well, when the AFL and NFL agreed to merge, Davis's job as commissioner became irrelevant, so he came back to Oakland, not as the head coach, but as the managing general partner, the owner, essentially. And here's the thing about Al Davis, and I say this with full respect for everything the man accomplished in football. Al Davis could not let go. He could not sit in the owner's box and just watch. He needed to be involved. In the play calling, in the personnel decisions, in the game plans, in every single detail of that football team. While John Rauch was on the sideline coaching his team to a 12-2 record in 1968, Al Davis was in his ear, constantly undermining him, second-guessing him, making personnel moves without even consulting him, overriding coaching decisions that Rauch had every right to make. Think about this for a second. You are winning 80% of your games. You've been to a Super Bowl. Your team is one of the most feared in professional football, and your boss is standing over your shoulder every single day telling you that you are doing it wrong. That was John Rauch's daily reality. And after the 1968 season, after going 12-2 and losing the AFL Championship game to the New York Jets, who, by the way, went on to win Super Bowl III with Joe Namath in one of the most famous moments in football history, Rouch had had enough. He walked away. He left the Oakland Raiders, not because he was fired, not because he was losing. He left because Al Davis made it impossible to do his job. Rouch said it himself. He told reporters that the working conditions under Davis were unbearable, that Davis overstepped constantly, that no coach could function with Al Davis breathing down his neck every minute of every day. And here's the thing, he was right, because almost every single coach who came after Rouch had the exact same complaints about Al Davis. This became a pattern that lasted decades, coach after coach after coach, leaving Oakland or getting fired because Davis could not stop meddling. Rouch was simply the first one who had the guts to say it out loud. But here's the cruel irony. The man who replaced John Rauch as head coach of the Oakland Raiders was a 32-year-old assistant coach named John Madden. Now let me be crystal clear about something. John Madden was a great football coach.
He won a Super Bowl. He went 103 wins, 32 losses, and 7 ties. He became one of the most beloved figures in sports history. Then he became maybe the greatest broadcaster the sport has ever seen. And then he became the face of the most popular video game franchise in history. John Madden is a legend. Full stop. No disrespect whatsoever. But the team that Madden inherited in 1969, that was Rouch's team. Those players, LaMonica, Biletnikoff, Jim Otto, Gene Upshaw, Art Shell, George Blonda, Rouch had coached those guys. Rouch had built that culture of dominance. Rouch had established the winning standard that those players carried forward. Madden walked into a situation where the car was already running at 200 miles per hour. He just had to keep his hands on the wheel. And he did. He kept it going. He added to it. He eventually won it all in Super Bowl XI. Madden absolutely earned his legacy. But the foundation, the blueprint, the winning culture that made all of that possible, that was John Rauch's fingerprint, and nobody ever acknowledges it. Madden got a video game named after him. Rouch got a footnote. Madden got a Hall of Fame bust. Rouch got a Wikipedia page that most football fans have never visited. Madden got immortality. Rouch got erased. And the story does not get any happier from here. After leaving Oakland, Rouch took the head coaching job with the Buffalo Bills in 1969. But the Bills were a disaster, a terrible roster with none of the talent he had in Oakland. He went 4-10 and was let go after just one season.
And that was it. That was the end of John Rauch's head coaching career in professional football. One bad year with a bad team, and the football world moved on. Nobody gave him another chance. Nobody looked at his 33-8-1 record in Oakland and said, hey, maybe this guy deserves another shot with a competent roster. He just disappeared. Rauch stepped away from football. He moved into private life. And on June 25, 2008, John Rauch passed away at the age of 80 in Oldsmar, Florida. No fanfare, no retrospectives, no celebration of a coaching legend. Just silence. And this is the part of the video where I really need you to think with me, because this is not just a football story. This is a story about how history gets written, and more importantly, who gets to write it. History does not always remember the person who deserved to be remembered. History remembers the person with the better story, the better brand, the louder voice, the longer tenure. John Madden coached the Raiders for 10 seasons. That is a long time. That is enough time to build a narrative, create a legacy, become iconic. John Rauch coached for 3 seasons. And even though his winning percentage was higher, 3 seasons is not enough time for the world to build a statue in your honor. And when you add in the fact that Al Davis, the most powerful man in Raiders history for nearly 50 years, had a personal conflict with Rauch, that guaranteed Rauch would be written out of the story entirely. Davis controlled the Raiders' narrative for decades. He decided who got celebrated and who got forgotten. Rauch challenged Davis. Rauch stood up to Davis, and for that, Rauch was erased from the history of his own franchise. Think about that for a moment. A .805 winning percentage, and the reward was being completely forgotten. Let me put John Rauch's numbers next to some of the most celebrated coaches in football history, just so you can see how truly absurd this is. John Rauch, .805. John Madden, .763. Vince Lombardi, .738. George Hollis, .682. Don Shula, .665. Every single one of those coaches is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Every single one of them is a household name. And the guy at the top of that list, the guy with the highest number, completely forgotten by mainstream football fans. Now I know what some of you are thinking, but he only coached 3 seasons. That is a small sample size. And you know what? You are not wrong. Sample size absolutely matters. If he had coached for 10 or 15 years, maybe that percentage comes down. Maybe it does not. We will genuinely never know, and that is the entire point. He was never given the chance to find out. That is the real tragedy here. It is not just that John Rauch was forgotten, it is that he was denied the opportunity to build a legacy that would have been impossible to ignore. So here's what I want you to take away from this video. The next time someone mentions the greatest Raiders coach of all time and the answer is automatically John Madden, I want you to pause.
I want you to remember John Rauch, the man who went 33-8-1, the man who won an AFL Championship, the man who coached in Super Bowl II, the man who posted the highest winning percentage in Raiders franchise history, the man who stood up to Al Davis when nobody else would, and the man who was punished for that courage with complete and total obscurity. Football history is full of names we will never forget. Today, I wanted to make sure that John Rauch becomes one of those names, at least for everyone watching this video right now. Because a .805 winning percentage deserves more than a footnote in a history book. It deserves to be remembered. It deserves to be spoken about. It deserves this video. Now here's what I need from you. If this story hit you the way it hit me, if you think John Rauch deserves to finally be remembered, smash that like button right now. I'm serious. That like button is the only way this video reaches more people who have never heard this story before. Drop a comment below and tell me who is another coach or player that history has completely forgotten. I want to know because I might make an entire series out of this. And if you're not subscribed yet, come on. You just watched a video about a man with an 805 winning percentage that you had never even heard of before today. Imagine what other stories are coming on this channel that nobody else is talking about. Hit subscribe, hit the bell. Do not miss the next one. Because on this channel, we do not just tell history, we correct it. I will see you in the next one.